Welcome to the All Together Show with Eric Satz. On this show, you'll hear Eric's unfiltered interviews with interesting and untraditional entrepreneurs who ignored boundaries, followed their instincts and own paths, and are now empowering others to do the same. Subscribe to the show and learn more by visiting alltogether.show. And now, your host, Eric Satz.
My guest on the show this week is Marcus Whitney, author of Create and Orchestrate, The Path to Claiming Your Creative Power from an Unlikely Entrepreneur. I completely disagree with unlikely entrepreneur when it comes to Marcus. Anyone who knows him knows he can't help himself. His story is truly unique and awe-inspiring. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it.
This episode of the All Together Show is brought to you by Alto IRA. Alto is a digital, self-directed IRA company modernizing IRA investing. They make it easy and cost-effective for individual investors to access their retirement savings and invest in alternative assets. To learn more, visit altoira.com.
Marcus Whitney, how are you?
I'm great, man. Thank you for having me, Eric.
Oh my God, thank you for being here. I'm just so excited about this. So the way I like to start is I like to give a little background on some folks. Your background is a little bit longer than most. So grew up in Brooklyn, spent a little bit of time in Virginia, eventually made your way to Nashville, programmer, CTO, entrepreneur, venture capitalist, soccer owner, I should say soccer team owner, podcast, I don't know what we call it, podcast people, and of course, author of Create and Orchestrate. All of these are descriptive, but what I think everyone listening would really like to know is, who is Marcus Whitney?
So I am a family man who's striving to be the best family man he can be and is deeply, deeply flawed in that ambition. You know what I mean? So much of what I try to do is to either provide for or set a good example for or take care of or lead or protect my family, and that's ultimately sort of what I am. And I think the way that I do it is by being creative. So, you mentioned sort of all the different things that are like titles based on things that you have accomplished or learned at some point in your life. And for me, the thread that runs through that entire, list is they're all creative professions. Some people may not know how creative being a programmer is, but it was like the best first office job I could have, because all you're doing is creating the entire time. It's a very, very, very creative role. And so I then just sort of took that and rolled that into my world of entrepreneurship. And I've always taken a very creative approach to that, but I'm sure we'll talk about that some more.
We will. And let's go back to the beginning. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Brookdale Hospital, December 30th, 1975.
You're so young.
I am young. I tell people all the time, you have to understand that you get to this point and you really understand how long life is, right? And so for me, it is marked. This book is a big marker for it, because in the book, I basically cover about 20 years of time, right? And it's really the time of my oldest son.
Right.
It really kind of goes from him being 1 year old, right, to him being 21 years old, which is what he is now as a Marine. And it's like, Eric, I'm 44. This book took 20 years, and my dad, not 20 years to write, but it covers 20 years of life. And my dad is 83, so he's 40 years older than me. So
you have good genes.
I do have good genes. I'm very lucky in that respect. In our family, if we don't smoke or drink ourselves to death, we live pretty long. It's basically the deal. It's basically the deal.
Sometimes two big ifs.
Yeah, totally. We have a love affair with those things, so we have to kind of watch those. But basically, I've got two whole other books I've got two whole other 20.
I think you've got
windows.
3 other books, by the way. I think you're only a quarter of the way through.
You know, maybe you're right. You know, all sorts of advances in science and longevity and things like that. But it is. I am young. Basically, just to sort of, I'm young. There's so much still to learn. I tell people that all the time. It's like I'm still really in the figuring this out phase. I don't have this figured out. You know what I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean. I often talk about what I want to do when I grow up.
Totally.
And I hope I'm always saying that.
For sure.
So, siblings?
Yes. So I have siblings. They are technically half siblings. So I'm my mom's only child, and I'm my dad's baby. So I've got a brother who is 20 years older than me. And then I've got siblings sort of in between all of that.
Okay.
Couple of brothers, 3 sisters.
Got it. So, your dad and your mom, what did they do when you were growing up? In the house, outside of the house?
So my dad always worked the night shift. That's really, really important because for any kid who's ever grown up in a household where the parent worked the night shift, that basically defines your relationship with that parent, which is to say they're there, but weirdly, during the day when you're awake, they're sleeping, okay? And when you're getting ready to go to bed, they're getting ready to go to work. And that's just the way that their clock runs. So,
right.
You know, things that you sort of take for granted, but you actually don't, because even at a young age, you're sort of smart enough to understand this. You know, when my dad would coach me in Little League, he coached me in Little League soccer. So that was like my first sport, which is why I've got sort of a soft spot for soccer, was because it was sort of the place where I got to first spend Nashville Football Club. It was the place where I got to spend, time with my dad, because during the week that really wasn't a thing. It really wasn't possible.
Right.
So when he would coach Little League, he had to sort of reverse his schedule on the weekends to be able to be an active dad. Right. And then back on Mondays, he would switch it back to sleeping during the day and being awake at night. And he worked hard jobs that it was also hard to be fired from. So they were very consistent and they were very dependable, and they came with pensions. So he was a corrections officer in New York City.
Okay.
Who at times would be working in Rikers Island, sort of notorious, prison.
Right.
Notorious for not good reasons.
Correct.
And then he retired from that job, and then he went to go work in the post office. So the really big post office downtown Manhattan.
Right.
And he wasn't like a delivery person. He worked in the post office, so like moving boxes around and sort of all that kind of stuff. So
how many years was he at each of those places? Do you know?
20 each.
Whew.
Yeah. So
people don't do that anymore.
No, 20 each. And basically like it split my life up until high school. So he worked, he retired from the post office after I was an adult, you know what I mean? And he retired from the corrections officer when I was like in middle school or something like that.
Okay. Wow. And what about your mom? Because I think she played a pretty big role in shaping who you are, no?
Yeah, my mom played a huge role. So she worked at a department store in Manhattan called B. Altman's.
Yep.
Okay. And she was a credit manager. So she was a boss. She had a team of people, and they managed the credit cards, the store credit cards for people. And so she had this office, and I would sometimes go into the office, and she had a team of people that worked for her and loved her. So much so that like one of the people that worked for her all those years ago actually moved to Nashville. He lives here now with like not in the same house as my mom, but she actually stayed with my mom and dad for like 2 years while she got on her feet. Gracie, she's basically like my aunt, but
right.
We're not actually related. She's just somebody who my mom managed. And
Right.
like my mom is just that person. She is the person who, like, if she's taking care of you, you're taken care of, and she will fight for you. She's like one of those kinds of people, right? So
She's a protector.
She's a protector. And almost to like a fault, almost to like it doesn't matter if you did the right thing or the wrong thing, she'll protect you, kind of thing, which actually I had to work my way out of it when I got out of the house, because I would like get in trouble. And it's like, where's my mom to like get me out of this? You know what I mean? But she was awesome. She worked in Manhattan. And so why that's important is that I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to school in Brooklyn. She was in Manhattan. Well, guess what? She couldn't like get off of work to pick me up from school. So my grandmother was the third parent in the equation. And she would pick me up from school every day, and I would go home with her. And that's where I would like do my homework and have dinner. And then my mom would come home from Manhattan, and she would pick me up from there and take me home. So my mom got me ready for school in the morning. But, I started the day with my mom. I ended the day with my grandmother.
That's a very matriarchal upbringing.
Completely.
And where does that experience manifest itself now for you as a parent of two boys yourself?
Well, my parents moved down here. They moved down here in 2007. So 2020, they've been 13 years. So one of the big ways was they were very, very engaged in raising my boys. I worked, and it's not that I wasn't present. Part of it was they moved down right as I started to go through a separation. So they were very, very engaged in raising the boys, and my boys are very, very close with their grandparents. So that's one big way we sort of carried that tradition on. I think also just a real deep commitment to parenting. And that really came from my mom. But then I learned as I got older, the providing piece of it that came from my dad, that when you're a kid, you don't really understand, because it's, you're dealing with money, and kids don't understand money. It's a conceptual thing. You can't really feel it. You don't understand the exchange of work for money, and then how that money pays for the things that you enjoy and experience every single day in terms of food on the table, and then in really special experiences like Christmas time and things like that. Right. So all of that stuff just feels like it's the magic that parents do. And you sort of ascribe that to the parent that spends the time with you the most. And it's not that my mom didn't pay for a bunch of stuff, but clearly like my dad was like the financial rock, because he was doing the super hard job. And so as I grew up,
what's your mom's reaction to that statement, by the way? He was doing the super hard jobs.
I think she'd agree with that.
Okay. Was it because of the hours? Was it because of the night shift?
No, it's just because working in the credit department of B. Altman is not the same as working in Rikers Island. I mean, it's just not in any way. Yeah. That's not a gender thing. Had my mom been a female corrections officer at Rikers Island, I would have said, "Oh, mom had the really hard job," right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Dad worked in environments where you don't like going to work. My mom liked her job. She liked the people she worked with. She had a lot of authority. Like on Christmas, Eric, the movie Big, Tom Hanks.
Yes.
Dude, that was like my Christmas. I would go to B. Altman, and basically like the store was my playground.
Could you play the piano with your feet?
Well, I don't know if I did that. But I got to play all the video games and pull all the toys off the shelf, and it was really like a New York movie Christmas. And that was because
that's pretty special.
Yeah, my mom worked in this super special place, which was a department store before the internet. It was awesome. Now she had people that she was annoyed with, but it's just not the same as working in one of the worst prisons in the world.
Yeah, no compare. Fair point. So, but she worked in credit.
Yeah.
Where did you have conversations about money?
No. So this is this is the funniest thing, right? She worked in credit, and part of that was collections. Okay. Because that's what it is, right? And no, we never talked about it. Like my dad was always so much more the one who would like sit me down next to him and pull out this ledger. So he had like, the ledger book, the long ledger book, and he'd pull it out and he'd show me. And it was clear that he was showing me something he was very proud of. But like later in life, I got to understand he's showing me how to keep records of your money. You know what I mean? But he would pull out the ledger and sort of show me he could account for every single dollar. He knew where it all was. He knew where every bill was and all of that kind of stuff. And like I got it, but I didn't get it. I mean, to be completely honest, like I got it, but I didn't get it because it was.
I know exactly what you're saying.
You know what I mean? It like I think the thing was it never made it to a practical application for me. And this is the thing I learned about myself much later in life is that I learn by doing. I don't learn by seeing and reading.
Right.
I learn by doing. So had I actually had to manage a bill and go through that process, it would have been a very different thing. I didn't have my first bill until I got a credit card in college that I shouldn't have gotten.
Right.
And I didn't know what the hell to do with it. Like all those times my dad sat me next to him with the ledger actually didn't help, quite frankly. Like, later in life, I was able to look back at, like as an adult when I had responsibilities, I could pull from that and find inspiration. But like in terms of like really knowing what it meant, I no.
So before you got to be an adult with responsibilities, you thought you were an adult with responsibilities, and you're at college. Let's talk about college, where you were, and how it would 2 years, 3 years,
two and a half, kind of
2.5.
Yeah.
How that evolved for you?
I mean, look, basically everything that could have gone wrong went wrong going to one of the best schools in the country. Okay, so I went to UVA. I got in early admission for architecture. I didn't really understand what that meant. Okay, so an A school is like one of the hardest schools at UVA. Like
architecture is crazy hard.
It's brutal. It's really brutal. Okay, it was not. And listen, here's the deal. Like I'm not a dumb guy, but I wasn't like knocking it out of the park academically in high school. You know what I mean? Like I was doing student government and I was an athlete, you know what I mean? State champion wrestler, Empire State Games decathlon. So like I was getting good grades, but I wasn't ready for the rigor of UVA school. So that's like issue number one. Issue number two is my parents never went to college. So, they sent us this whole thing around housing. And they had just created these brand new dorms called New College that were like up on a hill away from every other freshman. And
okay.
like, my parents were like, oh, this is going to be great, blah, blah, blah. And so they signed me up for New College and it was like a disaster. Like I really should have been with all the other freshmen. I shouldn't have been isolated up on the hill because that just made it so much harder for me to be socially integrated with all my other classmates that I just prioritized that. I just made that like the thing to do, it was literally super far away.
So it's interesting. And by the way, I'll just hold this up and I'll say, Marcus Whitney, create and orchestrate. And I don't know if it's it's chapter 1. But for the grace. And I'm not a particularly religious person. I'm Jewish, and one of my favorite sayings is that I'm the Pope of my own religion. But I don't think enough people walk around with an understanding that anybody else's outcome could also be your outcome. And that, by the way, is both positive and negative. And by the way, the titles you use and the subchapters, I think, are spot on. And if you could turn to page 21.
Okay.
And I'm really reminded of Trevor Noah with this. Mm-hmm. But like the last full paragraph on the page if you wouldn't mind reading it, I'd love it.
Yeah. Starting with lucky for me.
You got it.
Okay. Lucky for me, there was not much illegal inventory in the apartment during the raid, and I avoided being charged. Had they chosen to raid the apartment on a different day, the rest of my life could have been much different. I never sold drugs again, and I committed to making money legally since that day.
There, but for the grace. Yeah. I mean, I think to take an experience like that and use it to, I think, turn things around, because then you headed home, right?
Yeah.
Did you head home after that?
Yeah.
Basically. Or am I mixing up?
No. I mean, that was a bit. I mean, look, I stayed out a little bit longer after that, but not much longer. Not much longer. That was a big shakeup.
And so when you go home, and you've got to face your parents who have worked as hard as they have to help you get to where you are at UVA, and you have a conversation with your dad. Can you tell us about that conversation?
Yeah. It's there's no two ways around it. I mean, when you have failed out of college, started selling weed and gotten busted by the cops, and then you go home because like you're out of money and you don't have a college to go to anymore, that's called failure. That's all that is, right? So, it was going home a failure. That's what it was, and it's not the only bottom I've ever had in my life, but it was a bottom,
Right.
And it's you feel a lot of shame, you feel a lot of guilt. The conversation with my dad was, he didn't yell at me. He was just like, you have got to get yourself together, and I think the clarity around how much of his effort I had squandered, being, just not being selfish and not being thoughtful. It was just, like when I was doing all that stuff, I never thought I was going to end up having to go back home. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't.
Of course.
I just didn't see that happening until it happened, and then it was like, okay, so it's a bottom, it's a reorienting moment. You're trying to like just figure out, okay, what the hell just happened? What do I do now? But it wasn't, I wasn't like giving up or anything. I didn't have this sense of I need to give up. It was more just like, wow, that was a big failure, huge failure, and I have to do things differently going forward, for sure. I have to do things differently.
It was more get up, less give up.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
because any further down from there is like real down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like really, really bad.
So let me ask you about that, because then you go to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have two jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you choose to go to work versus trying to figure out how to go back to school? Or do you think you're going to work and go back to school? What's the thought process there?
Well, I actually tried to do both. I actually did, and I didn't put this in the book, but I actually did enroll in City University of New York.
Okay.
And I did take some classes while I was also working. But, there was this like, that just gave me this huge reality around, oh my God, I was at UVA and now I'm at like CUNY Metro Tech. Goodness gracious. These are not even in the same universe. I mean, no disrespect to Metro Tech, at all, but like, oh my God, how far have I fallen? You know what I mean? And I just felt that the thing I needed to do most was work and get working experience and just kind of get more into the real world. I felt like I was like living in a fantasy world and like I just needed more reality. So I just leaned into working, just as a way to try to like ground myself in some sense of reality that I could sort of push off from.
And this is where you meet your wife.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing? How'd you meet her?
I was working. She was working in the same place as me. We were both. She was doing a more of administrative work, and I was doing collections. I was doing collections. I'd moved.
Credit.
Exactly. Credit. I had moved to Georgia by that point, and I was doing collections, and I wasn't very good at it because I just, this was not like a department.
I don't believe that statement, by the way.
Well,
because you can talk to anybody, which I think is half the challenge. It must be 80% of the challenge.
It is. So I've had multiple collections jobs in my life, and I was good at many of them. I was not good at this one. I got fired from this one because the collections that they asked us to do were really hard collections. This was mobile home stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, so really bad stuff.
You almost don't want to collect.
You don't want to collect. You don't want to do it. It's not
right.
It's not like the stuff that I had been collecting on in other places. So I got fired basically because I was not willing to be the kind of person you needed to be to do that job. But I met her there. She was there. She was cute. I was young, and
how old were you?
22 probably.
Okay.
That point, yeah.
So fast forward, you're going to Nashville you have one child and one on the way at this point.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we leave Atlanta for Nashville, 1-year-old, one on the way. And I'm a professional. I'm coming to Nashville with the skill set of being a professional waiter. And my wife is pregnant enough that it basically doesn't make sense for her to try to go get a job. You know what I mean?
Nobody's going to hire.
Or just like we wanted to take care of the baby and like.
Okay. Got it.
It was more. I think it was more that.
And so at some point you figure out, you know what, coding may be the way out of this waiter job and lifestyle, and a way out of the hand-to-mouth living that you're doing at the time. How do you decide it's coding, and how do you just start coding? How does that happen?
So it was the year 2000, which was the dot-com boom. And so the stories that were, there were a bunch of different stories that were happening at that time. But one of the storylines, all the stories around the money and the stock were inaccessible to me. They were outside of the range of what I could even see myself doing. So I wasn't focused on those. What I was focused on was this storyline around high school kids, like dropping out of high school and going and getting like $50, $60, $70, $80, $90,000 a year jobs. Do you remember those stories?
I do.
Okay. So
I was banking the internet back then in California.
Okay. So those storylines were the ones that jumped out at me because all I saw was, someone without a college degree is getting money. That could be me. You know what I mean? Like that was what I saw. And then where I was lucky was my uncle, my mom's brother. He was a programmer at IBM in upstate New York. And when I was young, one of the many gifts that, I got was an IBM PC Junior from him. And back then, like these computers had like no memory. You know what I mean?
I had a Commodore 64.
Yeah, that was my and the Commodore was the better computer, by the way, by far. The IBM was not the better computer, but it was the one I got because my uncle worked at IBM. And those computers, they didn't like do anything that you didn't program them to do. Basically, you had to like program them,
right?
Basically, so I learned basic programming, and so it's like anything you learn at that age. You can recall some of it, like enough of it to be able to start a journey or to give you the confidence to start a journey. And that's what happened. So, I just started the process of buying books. We had a Gateway PC computer in the week-to-week motel we were living in. And, I would just buy the books and learn stuff and, figure out how to make websites and program in JavaScript. And
So I love the story of the first website you get hired to build. And I can tell it actually, but I'm going to let you tell it.
yeah, so my wife really wanted to have a natural childbirth for the second child. The first one was rough. She had a C-section. And she wanted to have a natural childbirth, and that's actually pretty risky to do.
Yep.
And so if you want to try to do that, you really need to have a midwife in addition to, the full hospital staff, because you just need that. You need that. And
right.
We did not have midwife money. But the midwife really liked us, and she was like, I want to try to figure out a way to work with you all, but like, this is what it costs. And I was like, well, I can make you a new website. And she was like, all in. She was like, oh my God, I really need a new website. Like, I really want a new website. And it was great because I've been learning Flash, which back then was like Flash was incredible back then. And
about to die forever.
Yeah, they had no idea. They had no idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, I built her this really cool Flash website. She was so happy about it.
So here's the thing. You say you build your first website and you don't get paid for it.
Yeah.
You did get paid for it.
I did. I mean, it was a barter. It was bartering.
That counts.
It does count. Oh my gosh, it was so valuable to us. I mean, it was, I mean, it's probably priceless actually,
So I'm going to fast forward a little bit because you've been teaching yourself to code, and the first website you build for the midwife, and this becomes the first project that you get to point at for others to hire you. And you go for coffee with Clint Smith and Will Weaver, who had recently founded a company called Emma. And anyone in Nashville knows Emma. Others, certainly at the time, not so much. And this is where, when I hear you describe your mom as that person, I'm in no way surprised, because in the introduction, in the forward to the book, Clint Smith describes that coffee as meeting the guy with it. Like, you can't necessarily define it. You may not be able to put words to it, but when you meet it, like, someone who has it. And he says, Marcus had it. And, it was one of those instant moments where they're like, we got to hire this guy. So I'm curious, did you have the same experience at that meeting?
I was really excited about working with them. I did not see that I had the thing that they saw in me. But I definitely thought I was up for the challenge, and I really wanted to be there. They were just really cool guys. Honestly, just super cool guys.
They're so different from one another.
Yeah, they are, but man, it's so weird to have been there that early, because later on in the course of the company, Clint would sort of go, like, they were kind of co-CEOs for a while, and then at some point Will would go on to found a different company, and Clint would sort of carry on Emma until the company was sold and everything. But like, when I was there, it was impossible to separate them. You know what I mean? Like to
sort of like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
1000%. They like I know they're very, very different. I know that, but they were two sides of the same coin. You know what I mean? In the founding of it, and like, their partnership was very, very influential.
Now, did you fit? So did you feel that when you first met, or is that something you realized and learned sort of over time?
I realized and learned over time. And the way that they carried each other, in the way they lifted each other up, and the way that they divided up the responsibilities, in the ways that they collaborated. They had this thing that they would do. I don't even remember if I wrote about it or not. I think I did. In the partner chapter. But they had this thing that they would do where, like, we'd all be sitting in this room. This was when we moved to Hillsborough Village. And we were in that big house.
I remember that office.
Okay, yeah. So
yes.
So we were in that house.
Office.
That house office, yes. And the leadership team was downstairs. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there were like 6 or 7 of us on the leadership team, including Will and Clint.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd all be down there and, like, working at our own desks and everything. And there'd be like these moments where they would both just stand up and walk out together. And you knew that they had been chatting about something digitally, but like whatever they were going to talk about, like, you weren't in it. You know what I mean? And it was like the partners were talking and they were going to go take a walk and go talk. And man, like, I have to say, I think, like, over time, that was one of the things that contributed to me wanting to leave, was just like knowing I was never really going to be able to crack into that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But they were, for the entire time that I was there, which was 4 incredible years, I don't remember seeing them ever fight or disagree. And I know they did. They did, but I never saw it. You know what I mean?
Which is a testament to their partnership, quite frankly. Yeah. And yes, you do write about them in the partnership section. So Clint, by the way, I think one of the most gifted writers there is. And so you cannot pick a more perfect person to pen your forward for you. But also in the book, you talk about culture and creating culture. And I remember, because I would see Clint almost every morning at Fido for coffee. And I remember people showing up sometimes with these cards, which were Emma cards, which said something like, "You are awesome," like free Fido on Emma, something like that, right? And I just remember seeing that card and thinking, that is brilliant. It cost them $2 and bought them 2 years. Like, from a, and I'm not saying they were doing it because they were trying to earn goodwill. They were doing it because they believed in the team and the company and wanted everybody else to feel that same thing, and that trust that they had in the team. So I'm kind of telling your story for you at Emma, but how does that experience at Emma rub off into future experiences for you? And where does it go sideways or wrong?
Yeah, so I think the thing that I could not have possibly understood until I launched my own company, and then I started trying to create culture, and then I realized A, how hard it is to do, and B, how important it is for it to be authentic to who you are. Otherwise it doesn't work. Like, replicating what somebody else doesn't work. Was the very first thing that I did when I left Emma was I started this company called Remarkable Wit. It was a developer shop, basically. And we pretty quickly scaled up the team. I mean, we were at 10 people within a little over a year from me leaving. And the vast majority were developers, but we had like an office manager and a marketing / sales person who was helping, and a project lead. But everybody else was a developer or like a front end person. And like, a lot of what we were doing was the fun aspects of culture. You know what I mean? Going out to get drinks, or blowing off at 12 o'clock on a Friday, or these like these experiential aspects of culture, which are real. But that's,
of course they are.
But that's not why you build culture. Like, you build culture for the hard days.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
yes.
And that's what I missed, because we navigated the hard days at Emma so well in retrospect, but they were so hard when we were going through them that, like, I couldn't possibly see or feel like the culture there. But that's when it's most there, is when it doesn't feel like it's there and everyone is just doing the thing you're gonna do when you're in a crisis, right? It's like when that's happening, and we had a lot of those crisis moments at Emma, man.
I walked into the bottom of that house with some of my own crises as a customer, wanting to know when it was going to get fixed.
Oh my gosh, we had some real, I mean, like existential. Oh my God, is the company going to die? Crises.
Mm-hmm. And so, is there something you can point to, like what the culture, like, is it something that is binding for that culture? Is there something that you point to which gets you through those tough times?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the ultimate definition of culture is what the leader does. At the at the end of the day, right? It's what the leader does. And so much of what I was picking up was the experiential aspects of the culture, which were, they wrote like the book of Emma. It was like a Bible, you know what I mean? And you talked about Clint being this incredible writer, right? And like,
yep.
And he like wrote this book, and
he wrote good 1-sentence bios for everyone on the team.
Nuts. Like
yeah.
So all of these things were kind of like the way that Emma does things, right? But what I didn't understand was that was actually like what Will and Clint would do. Like, that's actually what that book was, right? And it was their ability to write it without putting their names all over it, so that everybody on the team could see themselves in it, and also have a way to kind of know how to be like part of the Emma team.
Right.
And so when things would happen and they would do the things that they would do, they were doing the things they were going to do anyway, but they were not in misalignment with the book.
So was in the book of Emma, was there a stated mission and set of values?
As I remember, I think that there were, but I think, Clint is very, it's funny, I'm talking about culture, and I would say Clint is actually very counterculture in that he hates standards and he hates status quo, right? He hates doing things because that's the way other people do things. So what I would say is they were absolutely there, but I don't think he positioned them that way in there. Like, they're in there, but he would have never called them Emma's values.
Would he love the title of the chapter, Different is Better Than Better?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
So
Clint was very much about being, as a leader, it was very much about Emma not being like everybody else. Very much.
Hey, well, it worked out okay.
Yeah.
So there's a very specific experience you have, and it's a development cycle, and I can't remember what was getting fixed or improved upon. But your co-programmer, Jackson.
Yeah, Jack.
Is let go the next day.
Yeah, so that was a really big deal. That was a super big deal.
So I want to, if it's okay, I'd love to dig into that with you.
Yeah.
How did that affect the team and the culture and your feelings?
That was brutal. Okay. And
because he's a good guy.
Yes. No, listen, that was brutal because, it wasn't really about me, but I was like so in the middle of it, right? It really was about misalignment between Jackson and Will and Clint. At the end of the day, that's really what it was about. And really, even more than that, it was about the amount of pressure we were all collectively under. Okay, so here's what had happened. When I got hired at Emma, Jackson was there. But Jackson was not the original author of the Emma software. As the legend goes, the original version of the Emma software was written by an intern from college who they paid in beer. That's the legend.
Okay. I
wasn't there for that. Okay. So
I feel like that's the code that we were using at Plum Good Food.
Probably. So I'm like a year after they started. In fact, because you're an OG and all this stuff, the first version of Emma was not a company called Emma. They were an agency called Cold Feet Creative.
Yep.
And they made a product called Emma. When I got to Emma, it was still Cold Feet was the company. My first business card said Cold Feet. But Emma was the product, and they were in the process of killing Cold Feet and just being all about Emma. That's when I got there.
Got it.
So Jackson was adding on to this really just terrible piece of software. I mean, not terrible. I hate to do that because I don't like to throw previous developers under the bus.
There are development stages.
And what had really happened was somebody wrote this effectively prototype plus, we'll call it, right? It worked.
Okay.
But then they sold Thomas Nelson. You know what I mean? Because Clint is so good at his writing and this positioning and his branding, and Will's doing great design and stuff, and they sold Thomas Nelson. So now
which is incredible.
Yeah. So now you got to send all these emails, and guess what? This little thing can't send all these emails. So Jackson is in there plug in the dam, you know what I mean? And trying to add features. And so they bring me in to help, and man, it does not take very long before we realize this has to be rewritten completely. And that means the company's got to go dark for weeks. And so, man, there was just so much of this was circumstantial. This was not, in retrospect, it's really clear to me. It was not so this person was bad, that person was bad. The company was made up of only 7 people at the time. You had a salesperson, Annie, very, very strong personality, you know what I mean, but very, very effective at what she did.
Yeah.
Will, Clint, Kathleen, who was also on sales, me and Jackson and Allison. Basically the company at that time. It's the core of what you would need to do something like this. And, as it is, everybody else in the company is depending on Jackson and I. They literally are helpless. They can't do anything. And they have to just trust us that we're going to deliver a new version of the platform. And it just was so much pressure, man. It was.
You can feel them standing over your shoulder every single day and night, even when they're not there.
Dude, it was brutal. It was really, 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 really hard. I mean, not kidding. Jackson and I, and other people, hung in there long days with us too. But man, he and I would be in that house. Now this was not the Hillsborough Village house. This was the Centennial Park house.
This the other house.
Yeah. We would be there for days. 2.5 days. Staying up all night there the next morning, Red Bull and vodka and Coke. I mean, this was really, really, really difficult stuff. Okay.
And this story plays itself out, by the way, across the country among so many startups every single day.
Dude. And that's why I made sure to put a note in there that, because also at the time Jackson was exploring the Plato's Closet franchise business. And so that also played into it, right? This was not his only option. You know what I mean? He had this other thing that he was working on with his father. And, later on, I was able to sort of put all that in perspective and be okay, there's a lot of dynamics going on there. But for me, the only thing I had going on in the world was this programming job. Okay. That was it.
That was it.
And Jackson was my senior. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
it was a big deal. Dude, now all of a sudden you're the man.
Dude. We didn't really finish the rewrite, but we finished an alpha of the rewrite, and we hit the button on billing. and the billing started running and the cards started going. And before the billing script was done, they walked in and I was there and like let him go. And it was like, you know, I'm just sitting there like, and then they came back in and they said, you know, we are really sorry that just happened. We want you to stay. And I was just like, I need a minute. You know what I mean? Because it was just like, oh my God. Now, obviously, as the story plays out, I stayed. Clint wrote the foreword to my book. We're all good friends. You know what I mean? I'm still friends with Jackson, you know.
Right.
But I will tell you, you know, that put tremendous strain on my relationship with Jackson for a period of time. You know, he
sure.
You know, I mean, it was, you know, it was just a very hard thing because it was a very hard thing.
Because now you're tasked with building an engineering team.
Yes, because I'm tasked with building an engineering team, and because, you know, and because the truth is that Jackson and I built the framework that business was built on from a technology perspective. I mean, I didn't do it by myself.
And you take pride in that.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do it by myself though. This is super important.
Right.
He and I did it. Okay.
Right.
And then we brought in Kim, who was like better than both of us. You know what I mean? But the important thing is like, he and I built the technology that, you know, they ran on for years. You know what I mean? Like developers way after I was gone would be cursing our code. You know what I mean? Oh, I hate this code, but it's paying your paycheck right now, buddy. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can hate it all you want, but like you're getting paid because of it. So, you know, it's like we did that. And so there's always been this, you know, this, I don't know. I've always just sort of looked back at that moment, and you know, I'm very grateful that he has done so well in his business career, and and I'm very grateful that this didn't have any significant implications for him. You know what I mean? At the end.
Yeah. So you leave, and you mentioned it earlier. You start Remarkable Wit.
Yep.
Which, you know, I think most people would consider to be a development shop.
That's what it was. Yeah.
But do we even refer to them back then as development shops?
No. See, this is the thing.
That's where I'm going.
No, this is the thing, man. You know, and that's why it's fun to have this conversation with you, somebody who was doing Plum Good all those years ago, right? You know what I mean? Like you were doing one of those business models all those years ago that now is much more like there are names for it. You know what I mean? But like,
that's a longer conversation.
Right? You know, it's like you were doing Instacart, right? You know what I mean? And it's like back then we were just making this stuff up, right?
Right.
We're making this stuff up. And so, yeah, you know, no, it wasn't called a development shop, which was why I like came up with the stupid name venture technologist, right? You know what I mean? Because like there wasn't really a name for what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to build a team of developers. We're going to bring our talent and capabilities as capital to help startups get off the ground. And I built it really off the working theory of Will and Clint, because here you have two incredible founders who couldn't have done it without a developer. So I just I just went back to what I knew, you know.
It makes perfect sense.
Seems like it.
Often hard to scale, but makes perfect sense.
Yeah, not impossible, but damn hard to scale. And you probably need to be a much better business person than I was in 2007 to do it.
What becomes Moon Toast is Remarkable Wit's largest client. And this conversation by itself, I'm sure, could go for hours. So we'll try to get there faster. But long story short, you find yourself raising institutional capital or venture capital.
Yeah.
For the first.
I call it venture because it came from Charlie, I mean, some would call him an institution, but it was all his money. So, you know, at the end of the day.
It's definitely venture money.
Yeah, it's venture money.
So,
it's venture money.
So you go to Charlie Martin because this company, were they called Moon Toast at the time?
Yeah.
When you were built? Okay.
Oh yeah.
So Moon Toast needs money essentially to pay you.
That's right.
That's right. And you need Moontoast to be able to pay you because they represent 70-ish percent,
70-ish percent of the revenue of the company.
Of your business.
That's right.
And Charlie says, yeah, I'm interested. I like the Moontoast idea. But you got to fold a Remarkable Wit into it, and you got to go to work for Moontoast. And by the way, we're going to hire a CEO out of Boston. You have to spend half of your time in Boston. Is that about right?
Yes, but it's a very compressed version of what took place over the course of several months, right? You know what I mean? So
fill in, if you would, for us some of the key
steps there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing, and I did leave this out of the book. So there's
good.
yeah, I left this out of the book. So Stephen Collins was in Nashville for a period of time. Stephen, a very successful technology entrepreneur and executive. Really, he's a very successful technology executive.
Yes.
And he was part of the DoubleClick team, one of the biggest sort of wins in ad business history. So Stephen happened to be in Nashville for some years, and Stephen was one of the people. I feel like Clint is the reason why I met Stephen. But anyway, Stephen, meets with us, and I think he's looking for a reason to stay in Nashville. So he's looking, is there anything tech here that's like reasonably exciting that I can help happen?
Right.
And so he saw this, and he saw me, and he liked me, and he was like, hey, I think maybe this can be it. And so he started to come on board to help. And he was like, yeah, but Marcus, you're a mess as a leader. And, he was right. But if you know Stephen, his style is very abrasive. Okay?
I know Stephen.
Yeah. So he's an acquired taste as a style. I think he would say that. But I was so underdeveloped, as a professional at that point in my life. I mean, first of all, it's literally 13 years ago from now, right? You know what I mean? So I'm like a kid. I'm like a real kid, you know what I mean? Who's looking at this guy who's got this incredible house and he's made millions of dollars and all this other kind of stuff. So, there's that aspect of it, that when he says something, I'm not even really challenging him, because I'm just like, dude, who the hell am I to challenge you? I cannot challenge you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, that was a big dynamic that I did not put in the book because it would have taken too much time and to really unpack it. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
I know.
So was he interested in Remarkable Wit, or was he interested in Moontoast at the time?
Moontoast.
Yeah.
So he is
okay.
Yeah, he's a very, very big part of the shutting down of Remarkable Wit. A huge part of that.
Okay.
And me becoming the CTO and sort of all that stuff. He's rich, so he doesn't need money.
Right.
Right. Well, I mean, eventually he needs to be paid, but he doesn't need money to come.
Well, he moves to Texas for that.
Right, exactly. But he doesn't need it as he's helping this Moontoast thing sort of happen.
Right.
And to be fair, he is putting me in a position to have my first venture back deal.
Yeah.
And so it's not
at least it feels that way.
Well, no, it is. It is technically what it is, right? I wrote about it the way I want to understand it, and the way I want to tell the story. I wrote about it, which was, it was the folding of my business and me getting a very, very small percentage and no board seat in somebody else's business.
So that's what I'm talking about. So
and then being propped up as the co-founder. By the way, while this is all happening, because it's my first experience, again, it is my first experience.
I'm with you.
I had never been a C-level in a venture-backed company that had board meetings.
Right.
This is really important, right? Because that experience is invaluable. It's you don't even know how to put together a board deck. And then you learn how to put together a board deck. After years of doing that process, I started realizing, can we curse on this?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You start realizing, holy shit, I'm totally getting fucked here.
And by the way, we skipped out the part. Moontoast didn't work out.
No, did not work out. So this is the part that you talk about the Monday morning quarterback. That's what I Monday morning quarterback, because I'm always learning lessons from why it didn't work out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not because I want to replay it in any way, shape, or form, but more because, man, that experience is the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, the lessons from that were, Eric, like, we did so many things wrong that we thought we were doing right. I mean, so many. Like, the number of things that we did wrong that we thought we were doing right was just like.
But that's all hindsight. And I think that's something else that's important for entrepreneurs to hear, because we could also be looking back and saying, we did these 10 things right. And, it would be a different story. But you don't know at the time. You make the best decision you can with the information that you have. For example, building on top of the Facebook platform.
Yeah.
Looked like a good idea.
Looked like a great idea.
At the time.
At the time. And I mean, we had all these examples. We were talking about, man, look at Zynga.
And that's, by the way, Exhibit A of building on the Facebook platform.
Look at Zynga, man, the valuation's unbelievable. They're growing, leaps and bounds. Oh my God, people are building cows, farm.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is so.
I still don't understand buying fake stuff in games, by the way, but that's just me.
I'm with you. I understand that people do it, but I don't understand why people do it. Like,
exactly. That's what I mean.
I just get that they do it. It's a thing that people do.
So, yeah. So, but I want people to buy the book and read the book, because then they can read for themselves a greater sort of part of the discussion of what went wrong at Moon Toast. But what comes after Moon Toast?
Yeah. So, man, what comes after Moon Toast is what was also happening at the same time as Moon Toast, which is I was, on the side, nights and weekends, building Jumpstart Foundry with Vic Gatto.
Another great Amherst College grad, by the way. Just got to throw that in there.
You're an Amherst guy? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Vic was 2 years behind me. And my senior year and his sophomore year, we lived down the hall from each other.
Dude, I was wondering why you guys had that really super long-term thing between you. Okay. Got it.
That's why.
Got it. Okay, cool. So, yeah, man, the whole time that Moon Toast was happening, we were doing the Jumpstart Foundry thing, and that's fine. But that's actually
can we tell the audience what Jumpstart Foundry is?
Sure. It was a tech accelerator from 2009 to 2014, and a tech accelerator back then, because they're not quite the same anymore, but back then meant you would bring in a group of startup founders who were building a technology product. You would literally make them move to your city if they didn't already live there, and they'd have to come to classes, literally classroom style classes for 12 to 14 weeks, and you'd have all these mentor nights. And you would walk them through sort of a textbook version of entrepreneurship. Like you teach them things like Steve Blank's customer development. Later on, they started adding lean startup and the business model canvas to it. But it was all these kinds of startup MBA crash course kind of stuff, and you would invest a very, very small amount of money, $15,000 in exchange for a pretty big slug of equity for that amount of money, 7% equity. But again, everything changes. Everything is evolving. When that model was invented by Y Combinator in 2005, nobody was doing it, and in Silicon Valley, it turned out to work really well. And then Techstars took it in 2007 and moved it to Boulder, Colorado, which then made it accessible for places like Nashville in 2009 to start it. So that's what it was, and nobody was making any money on it. We weren't making any money on it, but it was fun, and it was something that helped boost the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. So Michael Burcham was very involved in it, and it was fun. It was fun to help these companies get off the ground and work with entrepreneurs, and it was a fun community thing. But really, what was happening was Vic and I were developing a friendship, a partnership, a sense of trust, a sense of understanding who could do what well, and how we would work well, so that when 2014 hit and my business wasn't even my business. The business I was employed at, Moon Toast, was going to fold. Before they folded, though, they fired me. So when they were ready to fire me, And then Vic was like kind of done with the Solidus thing. We both were like, well, we've been,
Solidus was also a venture capital firm, kind of family office venture capital firm.
Yeah, that's right. We were like, well, we've been sort of working together for, these last 5 years. We like to work together. We have this brand that's, people like. Can we take it and can we make something real out of it? And so in 2014, I went full time into Jumpstart Foundry. We turned it into a healthcare fund as opposed to a tech accelerator. And then 3 months later, Vic came on board full time, and we've been doing that ever since.
That's awesome. So in the book, and I'm going to go back to this because you get divorced from your first wife.
Yep.
And you talk about the 4 burners. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about work-life balance, mm-hmm. which I don't believe in work-life balance, by the way. I
don't think I do either.
I don't think you do. I don't think you do either. That is sort of where I'm going, which is, I think it's really kind of a seesaw is the way I think about it. And sometimes work's up here and life's down here. And sometimes life's up here and work's out of the screen, whatever you want to. And, from time to time, it's, balanced, but not frequently. But I think your burner analogy is superb. I think you borrowed it, but I think it would be great for the listener to quickly get an understanding of work-life balance in the context of 4 burners.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things about the 4 burners is it's a mystery as to who actually came up with it.
Okay.
It seems to be mostly attributed to David Sedaris.
Okay.
In a New York
Who
Times,
is a brilliant writer, by the way.
Brilliant, right?
Funny.
In a New York Times, and also a very prolific writer. So it makes sense that he would be somebody to come up with something like this. But I don't think he's ever said he came up with it. So anyway,
could be his sister.
Could be his sister.
And he wrote about
it. Could be. So the basics of the basic story around the 4 burners is that you look at your life like a stove. You got 4 burners. Anyone who's tried to cook things with all 4 burners knows it's basically impossible, right? You cannot keep track of everything. And then, and also the burners would all start to heat other things up. So, you have to sort of have this, this dance between the 4 different burners of life. And they're basically work, family, friends, and health. Okay. Those are sort of the 4 burners as laid out by David or maybe somebody else. And so what I said in the book is I said, look, this is a book about work. So we're just going to assume that your work burner is on, because what you really need to figure out is how you're going to negotiate the other 3, and then sort of what I said from there is what I've personally learned over time is like the health burner is the one you definitely don't want to turn off because
right.
The health sort of fuels the other 3, you know what I mean? But when you're young, you don't fully understand that because you take your health for granted.
Not at all.
Right? You get older and you're like, holy shit. I mean, this is why, you're like, I'm fit, I'm not drinking, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, because I've realized I want to continue to be prolific and I want to continue to work at a high level of quality. And this is just not possible without good health as you get older. That's the only way that I would say I'm young and I'm a baby because I've finally taken my health really seriously.
Okay.
If I was not, I would look and sound really old right now, even at 44. You know what I mean? I know some pretty old 44-year-olds, and a lot of it has to do with their health.
You do not look 44.
Yeah, I know.
But by the way, I'm not complimenting you anymore. You look too good. Well, I'm not doing any more compliments.
I mean, but a big part of that is because I am committed to my health burner, right? And then from there, you're like, okay, well, the family and the friends thing, and it's like, well, that's a dance, quite frankly. You know what I mean? And you got to kind of figure that thing out. And generally speaking, I started by saying, I'm a family man, deeply flawed, but really, constantly trying to work on that. I am probably 75 to 80% family, and then 20 to 25% friends. That's kind of how I negotiate that, and I'm just fine with that. I'm just fine with that. But you need to have the friends part too, because then you start to get isolated and lonely because family is not the same as friends. That's why it needs its own burner. You need that social time. You need that time to decompress, to be able to talk shit about your family. You know what I mean? And
always.
and get that off your chest. So yeah, but I do think it's a helpful analogy to just sort of think about these main areas of your life and how, if for nothing else, just like, look, how am I doing in those 4 areas of my life, and you'll invariably find, just like you said, the seesaw, that like something is on high, something's on low.
Yeah. So you eventually get remarried.
Yep.
To a smart, beautiful woman.
Yep.
What role has she played in your ability to do what you have done since? And can you talk about some of those things? Because it started with the, Jumpstart Foundry, and then evolving into, I'll start you off, Health Further, and then
Yep.
more. Would love for you to talk about the role that Rachel played in all this.
Yeah, so a big part of what Rachel has done is basically accepted me where I was when I met her, which was a real big mess. So I met her when I was separated, but not yet divorced. And we've started dating on day 1. And so she met me when I was separated, not yet divorced, and Remarkable Wit was melting. That was when she met me.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Trust.
So, dude, it's and then like we finally start, getting along, and then I go to Boston.
How hard was that?
I was terrible. Really, really, really hard. Really, really bad. Really, really hard. Really, really bad. So, I mean, it's just no other way to say it. It was really tough.
So how do you work through it?
Man, this is the thing. Like, we just both stayed.
It's hard work, isn't it? Even when you're in the same town, it's hard work.
It is really, really hard. So she and I are getting along right now better than we have at any point in the entirety of our relationship, and we've been together for 10 years now. Okay.
Yeah.
And we are getting along better now than at any other point, and it's not even close. Not even close.
Why?
Which is to say, there were times when like we really were not getting along at all. And like we stayed.
Yeah.
And I think like the thing is that she's done the things that like most matter to me, right? So what are those things? So she has always believed in me. That is basically like the thing my mother did.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like Rachel holds that kind of place for me. And that was kind of a big part of the end of my other relationship, was like sort of a deterioration there,
Right.
And so that is a very, very big thing. And I would say that that's something that I do my best to try to do for her too. You know what I mean? For both of us, our work is important to us. It's a big part of like our purpose. She's very successful in what she does in the country music industry. She leads editorial for all genres in Nashville at Spotify. So she's like accomplished.
She's it too.
She's accomplished. She's, she's very, 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 very good at what she does. And, it's not a bragging thing. It's that she's very passionate about that work. That work means a lot to her in terms of like why she's here on earth.
It's not bragging when it's real.
Yeah. She's super talented. And but she's passionate, and I think that is something we've always done for each other, is like this belief in the other person that, like, yeah, your reason for being here is a real reason, and you're really capable of doing this thing, and we really like help each other and support each other in that way. So that's a big part of it. I think we also both have very strong focus on family, both of us. Like, she's not here right now, she's coming back tonight, thankfully, but like she hasn't been here for a week and a half because she's been helping her dad through a really difficult moment, you know. And then the final thing is, dude, she just stayed because she met me at like legit my lowest point in adulthood. Like, she met me at the lowest point since the low point I talked about with my dad. You know,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
the point at which she met me was like, dude, complete disaster. So like, I'm so much healthier as a person now because someone like didn't like just throw me out. You know what I mean?
I do.
And that's her, you know? And yeah, I'm not going to be able to repay that, you know?
I suspect the feeling is mutual.
Well, I didn't meet her at her lowest.
Well, I don't think it's about having to be there at the lowest. I think it has to do with the support and the love. And I think, and you, I don't know if you write about this exactly in the book. I'm going to cheat and look at my notes. Yeah, no, I have a note here about communication. And, you know, whether it's a personal or a professional relationship, communication is so key. And it has to be constant and it has to be direct. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And I suspect that you all have that, which is really special.
Well, we have it, but I was very unskilled at it. Not dissimilar to how I was unskilled as a leader at it. I write about that. You know, it was very helpful for me to get training on that. I got my training on how to be a much better communicator in therapy. You know, I learned a lot. Like we were in couples therapy, and then I was like, you know what? I actually need like singles therapy. Because
I tried to get my wife to go with me to couples therapy. She's like, no, you need therapy.
Dude, I had to make that call. I was like, you know what? I need to like work on some stuff. And it's been a total game changer, largely because I learned how to communicate better, you know? And it is a skill. Like, I think that's something that we're really hard on ourselves about, like, how we show up in relationships.
Yeah.
But we're not taught how to show up in relationships. And this is about skill. It really is. It's you know, it's a skill that has to be taught and developed through practice, and you don't get it right all the time, you know. The reason why our communication is so much better is, one, I'm sober, two, I've gone to therapy and I've been practicing how to be better at communicating with her. It's just it honestly is that simple, you know.
And that's interesting because I think that ties exactly to something that I underlined on page 122 of the book, which is that choosing to grow means you choose to drive change as opposed to being subject to it. And I think that's true both for companies and for us as people, right? And you have a choice.
It is a choice.
And
it is
incredibly well said.
It is a choice.
So I want to talk about two more things. I want to talk about soccer.
Okay.
Because despite the fact that you're a Spurs fan, but
now I have to say, only because you brought it up earlier, that is the most political chapter in the book.
Why is it? Well, yes, it is. So Why are you a Spurs fan, Marcus?
Oh, that was just dumb luck. I'm a Spurs fan because when I decided to follow Premier League, which was very late in life, I didn't have a team. I grew up in New York, and quite frankly, we had the New York Cosmos. Pele was in New York when I was growing up, so like I didn't need Manchester United. Quite frankly, you know what I mean? Like I had Pele in my backyard. So when I'm like, okay, now I'm looking at this Premier League thing. I had to learn from scratch. I didn't know any of it. And I started they have these websites, on the internets, it's like, hey, welcome to the Premier League, looking for a team. And there's these pages that like tell you all these different things. And what basically got me was I grew up in a neighborhood in Brooklyn called East Flatbush that is very densely populated with people of Caribbean descent. So Jamaican, Trinidadian, Guyanese, Bahamian, lots of that. And so like if you grow up in New York, it's like black is not black. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm an African American, like with roots in the South, and I was a minority in my neighborhood that was full of black people because everybody around me was like Caribbean. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, so that neighborhood had a certain feel to it. And when I read about Tottenham, and then ultimately when I went there, like Tottenham is basically East Flatbush. Basically, like that's the bottom line. So it was the right call in terms of an authentic team that I would have followed if I actually grew up in London.
When you were there, did you see the Little Hot Chicken place?
Is it on High Road in Tottenham?
I think it's on High Road. I will find my pictures. I don't know if you remember this because New Year's Day, and I know they have.
I remember because you the Chelsea match, right?
It's the Chelsea match.
Yes, I remember this. Yeah.
And I must have texted you at halftime or something.
Yeah.
We were texting back and forth. Tottenham had a good day.
Tottenham had a good day. It was like the 4-2 win or something like that.
Maybe even 4-1. Yeah.
Maybe it was either 5-2 or 4-1.
It was a big spread. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big spread. It was also like there was no way we were supposed to beat Chelsea at that point.
Exactly.
We were just starting to come good.
Yes.
At that, I think Sherwood was the manager or something like that. You know what I mean?
It was a really fun match.
It was a big win.
Yeah. So let's talk about the MLS.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
How do you get involved with professional soccer in Nashville? And can you talk to us about what led to Nashville FC?
So Nashville,
because there are a series of steps for those who are listening.
Yeah, there are a series of steps. So Nashville Football Club was founded by a Mount Juliet native. Mount Juliet's a town right outside of Nashville. A Mount Juliet native named Chris Jones. Chris starts Nashville Football Club as a Twitter account when the Metros fold after a multi-decade run. And just, look, it's hard to run pro-am soccer. You know what I mean? It's just a hard thing to do. And so to even keep the team alive as long as they did was very admirable. But it folded. And he started it as sort of a way for the soccer community in Nashville to galvanize around a concept of maybe being able to field a team again. And it started as a Twitter account, and then Twitter account got some traction. And then he set up a website with a PayPal account and said, hey, we're going to be a nonprofit. Pay $75 to be a member. There is no team yet, by the way. It is literally a domain name and a PayPal account. And, hundreds of people sign up. I was, number 86, and so that was how I got involved. I got involved because I saw it on Twitter. I thought that was cool. I was learning about soccer, and I just bought a membership. And so I was on the email list, and it started with like, hey, we're doing, 5-a-side, fun games. Come out and be part of the Nashville Football Club 5-a-sides, right? You know what I mean? They were working with like Nashville sports leagues,
right?
You about like pickup games, basically.
Yeah.
Right? And then one day, like something happened where there was another person, Nolan, who had set up a team called the Nashville Atlas, and they had a license in the NPSL. This just shows you how branding and marketing can win. Chris had done all the branding work. So like everybody was supporting the Nashville Football Club brand, but he didn't have anything.
But he had no team.
So Chris and Nolan get together, and then they work out a deal, and the license for the 4th Division Nashville National Premier Soccer League is granted to Nashville Football Club. And now it goes from a Twitter account to a five-a-side fun thing to like they're playing in the NPSL, and they put a team together and they field a team, and it's all with a nonprofit, and they set up a board, and like literally it's paid for by the community. And then they make it to the playoffs in the first season, and so it's like this crazy story where they're putting 1,000 to 2,000 people in the stands every single match. So this is nuts. So I'm coming off the road from all the Moontoe stuff, and I'm getting ready to sort of re-enter Nashville as like where I'm going to be. So I missed a bunch of the games because like if I wasn't in Boston, I was home with my kids. You know what I mean? Like I was going out to these games.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, I want to see like the last game of the season. So I went to the last game of the regular season, not the playoffs. Last game, and I was like, holy cow, this is like nuts. This is unbelievable what they've done. And so Chris walked me around and gave me VIP treatment or whatever. And then he was like, hey man, let's go to lunch. And we went to lunch, and he basically said this was lightning in a bottle, and can you come on board and help us professionalize this thing? The Entrepreneur Center was a thing by that point, so people knew me through Jumpstart, my involvement there.
Right.
And I said, yeah, but I knew that the Moontoes thing was about to end. I was about to be doing Jumpstart full time, and I was like, look, man, I would love to, but I can't deal with like a bunch of stuff. Like if I come in, like I got to kind of tell you what to do, and then you just like do what I tell you to do. And at this point, like I had learned a lot from the Moontoes experience, right? So what did I know? Number one, the board seat matters. So like, yeah. I just like take that lesson, and I'm like, you got to make me the chairman of the board. You know what I mean? Like it was like the number one thing that mattered to me, and he did, and it ended up being like really, really important because I didn't have like unilateral power, but I had tremendous influence to then sort of guide the organization from that point. So very quickly after I became the chairman, an article came out in the Tennessean that a USL at the time 3rd Division team from Pennsylvania had been down to meet with Mayor Carl Dean, who was mayor at the time. About moving their team. Happened in the Tennessean, and we had to respond. So we responded. The Tennessean covered that, wrote a counter article, and then that started the whole process of conversations around going pro. And because I had done all the Jumpstart stuff, I knew how to basically position an entity for investment. I knew that we could not be a nonprofit and be positioned for investment. So I was like, we're going to have to figure out how to move to a for-profit, which means we're going to have to get the members of the nonprofit to vote to allow us to do this. And so all those kind of things I had to sort of set up for the group and work with the attorneys to do. But the important thing that I did was I packaged up a pitch.
Right.
And then everybody who was close to the team in the leadership started inviting people to the meeting. And Kyle Rolke, who was the assistant coach for the team at the time, he coached David Dill's son, Watson, in soccer.
Okay.
And so David Dill shows up to the meeting. David was at the time president of Life Point Health. He's now the CEO. So I didn't know David, but we had, like Bob Bernstein from Bongo Java was there. I mean, it was a good room.
Yeah.
A good room full of doors, And what we were looking at was, probably, NASL or USL. And, you're talking about a $3 to $5 million investment, which is, not crazy. So any one of these people could have like led that kind of deal, honestly. And so I put it together, and, David hit me up the next day. We did the pitch thing, and I walked through everything. And in the pitch, it was so crazy, is that in the pitch, I say we're going to get to Major League Soccer in 10 years. And it happened in 5.
Yeah.
It happened in 5 because, you can't control timing. It's just crazy like that. But David called me the next day and said, I'm in. I'm going to bring in Chris Redditch, who's a, very dear friend of mine, who's going to, kind of bird dog this for me. And he will be a partner with me. And so I met Chris. Chris and I became fast friends, and we just started this process. And then somewhere along the process, David said, I'm not doing this unless you join the ownership group. So you have to get off the board of the nonprofit and join this because I need you, I trust you, and I need you on this side of things, which I think was really smart, because it meant that he had sort of an ambassador who the supporters knew in the ownership group.
Right.
And what it did was it minimized the amount of time of the distrust. There was some distrust at the deal time, but like once the deal was done, everyone and then we had the USL thing, everyone was super happy and they felt like there was somebody in the ownership group who they really knew. They eventually got to know David and Chris a lot more, but they knew me from a year and a half of me being on the board. So yeah, man, look, we did that. We got the USL franchise, and then Bill and Will showed up in the paper like the next day, and then we went through that dance.
You're referring to the MLS dance.
It wasn't the MLS dance yet.
Okay.
It wasn't.
What was it first?
For them, it was NASL. They were looking at the NASL and we were looking at USL. MLS hadn't announced expansion yet.
Okay.
So that ended up happening later in the summer, maybe even like August. But initially they were like, we're talking to the NASL, which was like a league that ended up dying.
Yep.
Right. So
what happens when that conversation becomes MLS?
When it becomes MLS, I mean, I think there's just all sorts of questions around whether or not this can happen in the time frame. There was so little known about it. You know what I mean? And there's also like a million other things happening at that time. I mean, this is 2016. It's an election year. Bill is on Team Trump. Like, that's all happening. Like there's just a million things happening at one time. Mayor Barry is working on a million things,
Clearly.
She's, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff going on, dude. And
yeah.
And quite frankly, like they're talking about MLS, but like we have a USL franchise that like we have a commitment to the league that we're gonna play ball in a year and a half.
Right.
We got to hire a CEO and we got to do a stadium deal. And so we got stuff to do. So everyone's got stuff to do. And we're talking about MLS, and it's just hard. It's a very difficult conversation, and everybody has an angle and everybody's got value and everyone, and then ultimately, and this, that's why I say this is the most political thing in the book. Ultimately, the way that it ended is the way it had to end, or I'm convinced it wouldn't have happened, because like
tell everybody how it ends.
It ends that Bill and Will, who it's important to sort of note, Bill ran economic development for the state of Tennessee, so he had experience in bringing big deals.
Bill Haggerty.
Bill Haggerty. He
and
recruited John
Will Alexander, who is the senator's son.
Yes, Lamar Alexander's son. See, they're very, very, very connected political guys. They bring in John Ingram, who is a multi-generational billionaire, to the table, who has the ability to actually do this thing and the desire to do this thing, to sort of walk this hard road. And then we all have to negotiate and figure out how to work together or not. And see, the or not is really the mutually assured destruction society bit. Because like, there was a path, and I can say this now, but it's like so far in the past, you know what I mean? But there was a path that like there's an alternative universe where this ended very badly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And it didn't. We did the deal. We put everything together.
How did the deal work out? I don't know if this is going to make it on the show or not. How did the deal work out? Did Ingram buy you all out?
He bought the majority of the entity that had the USL franchise.
Got it.
He bought the majority of that, and then we in turn. Now keep in mind, when he made that transaction, the MLS team didn't exist yet.
Right.
So we, in exchange for that, we got a commitment to be part of the ownership group for Major League Soccer should that actually happen. So basically, it was like, if that happens, then that'll happen. If that doesn't happen, then John will be the majority owner of the team.
Right.
And, and we had to kind of come to a place where we were all like, yeah, that's what's going to happen, and we're good with that, and this is what's best for the city and what's best for the supporters, because ultimately that's what we all made the decision based on. It's like, what's best for the supporters. So
honestly, Marcus, I feel like we could go for another hour, but I know you got stuff to do, and
jump in 4. We can always come back and do another one. Man.
Yeah, no, we can. So, but for this one, as a way to end this one, I just want to say that in part of the book, you talk about how you started chasing press instead of business execution.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to you that the ability to look back and recognize that is, in my opinion, incredible. And then the ability to make it public and write about it is beyond words to me. And I think you just got to be an enormous person to be able to recognize that and then tell everybody about it. And so, thank you for sharing that story, that part of your story in particular.
Yeah. Well, again, it's one of those things where, like, it's the thing that all the experienced people know, but when they see the young person doing it, they just sort of scoff at them and make fun of them instead of actually, like, pulling them aside and having the hard conversation with them about it. And that's the God's honest truth about it. Like, and also, like, people enable that shit. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
like it's enabled by others, which is just like nuts. It's like nuts. It's when you're a young business person, you don't know. Like there's a business journal for a reason, right? There has to be for a reason. You have to kind of think like this thing is going to result in some good business. It doesn't, but like you think it's.
You think it is.
You think it is, yeah. And everybody who knows it doesn't tell the young inexperienced business person in years of their life, thinking that this thing is like going to do something for them. It's just, I tried to write the book that I wish I had when I left Emma. That is honest to God what I tried to do with this book, and so leaving that out would have been criminal.
So I'm going to find a way to end each of these episodes. And then we're going to have to come back and do another one because we got more.
The Altogether Show is brought to you by Alto IRA. Alto knows that the public markets offer insufficient diversification of retirement accounts. That's why Alto developed a streamlined platform to make it easy and cost-effective for anyone to invest their tax-advantaged retirement savings in alternatives. Assets like real estate, VC, and crypto that are outside of the public markets and available through Alto's 21 platform partners. To learn more, visit altoira.com.